Hi class, this is Joseph, your professor. Welcome to week one. We are in chapter 16, and there's no particular order, but I'll just go over a few things today. We'll just cover chapter 16. Okay, so a couple things to keep in mind is this. So we're on the canvas right now, right at your chapter 16, and what you'll see that I do for every chapter is I'll have pictures, just because I think it's cool to get a, mental picture of, who you're talking about. So Hildegard of Bingen, um, Virgil, Dante, Martin Luther, Erasmus, and, these are the major contributors to this chapter. And I don't include everybody, but I try to get most of them. Montaigne, Kepler, Galileo. And just to keep the mental note here for you, you do not have to look at any of these videos, including the one you're watching now. You do not have to look at any of these to pass my class. You just have to take the quizzes and do your weekly discussion, and then write your first paper, and then your final paper, which is your final exam. Now, I do the videos because I think it's an extra gloss or layer, rather than just being stuck in a book. So what I do, because I love watching videos like most people out there, I pick some of the videos that other people do that I think are really awesome, and then I make you a video for each chapter, just telling you, kind of highlighting some of the main significant things going on. But I won't cover everything in my videos. That's not what I do at all. I'll kind of weigh in here or there, and you'll see in a minute how I do this. But so to pass a quiz, you just need to do the reading. In other words, you can't really take a quiz unless you do the reading. So I leave that up to you. And there's specific details that are in these readings that I don't cover at all. And that's just for you to cover to take your quiz. But I'll give you a good overall picture of what's going on in each chapter with my video. Outside of my video, when you're looking at these other videos, I don't do these. These are from other people, but I really like them myself. I've seen them all, right? So I think they weigh in really good. Like if you like St. Hildegard of Bingen, Dante's Inferno, and how that's broken down, the Humanist movement, Luther, Montaigne, there's different videos, and then you can kind of go off on rabbit trails. And I don't do videos of everything, but, I try to highlight the most important things. So once again, friendly reminder, your quiz is due Thursday night. The answers will be revealed Friday from 12 a.m. to 12 noon. You can check your work, and then they go away. Again, you can take the quiz 3 times, 45 minutes each. It takes the highest grade, and that's what you get. If you ace it on the first attempt, or if you do well enough to where you don't want to take it the second and third time, that's great. You get 3 attempts. So that's pretty much it for, the videos. Once again, you can watch these if you want. If I were you, I would, but they're not required of you. So some of you could just do the reading, finish the quiz, and you're done. But again, I want to give you your money's worth, and I want to give you a better education, so I'll weigh in with these videos. Okay, so here's what I want to start doing. Let's get out of this screen. Let's go to your book. So you need this book for the class. I think I have a reserve copy in the library. In fact, I do have one in the library. You can rent this online. I've already went through that on my first video. But here's something. It's pretty much the reading for this week. You have to do chapter 16. You have to do chapter 17. And then if some of you saw this but didn't know, this word to the students, that's what is part of your reading. It's just a few pages. And it's going to be very important for an overall picture, like just what the hell's going on in this class. Oh, I mentioned the word hell. If you want to learn more about that, see Dante's Inferno. No, I'm just kidding. So, like, what the hey is going on with this class? Well, this is a class in philosophy. Philosophy has different categories, like main branches of philosophy. And I'm going to unpack what those are, because each author contributes differently to great ideas within these different categories in philosophy overall. And so for some of you that have never taken a philosophy class, this is going to be an awesome explosion of new ideas and words that you've used all the time, and you're thinking, what does that word mean now? Because when you get into philosophy, you think more deeply about what you're saying about reality. And so words start to matter because words convey ideas and meaning. But I'll get to that in a second. So let's go down here. Okay. Word to students. Well, let me just read to you. We all have opinions. We can't help it. Having opinions is natural to us as breathing. Opinions, moreover, are a dime a dozen. They're floating all around us, and they're so different from each other. One person believes this, another that. You believe in God, your buddy doesn't. John thinks there's nothing wrong with keeping a found wallet. You're horrified. Some of us say everybody's got their own values. Others are sure that some things are just plain wrong for everybody. Some delay gratification for the sake of long-term goals. Others indulge in whatever pleasures happen to be at hand. What kind of world do we live in? Jane studies science to find out. Jack turns to the occult. Is death the end for us? Some say yes, some say no. What's a person to do? So right there, we're situating the context. Like why this book? Why this class? Well, think about you in that paragraph. Where do you fit in? I'll give you an example. So here's something that horrifies me. I'm in a store. Before we even buy anything, my wife grabs a bag of chips, opens it up, and starts eating. Me? I'm like horrified. I'm like, that's ethically wrong. Nobody should do that anywhere at all, in any store, ever, in the universe. So that's just me, right? My wife has no problem doing it, because in her mind, she goes, well, I'm going to pay for this. And like somebody might crack open a drink, or, open up a bag and start eating grapes, and so we all have different reactions, right? Well, which one's the right one? Which one's the wrong one? Is there a middle ground? Is there not? Do we take a side? Do we not take a side? Is there a consequence of taking a side or not taking a side? So we start thinking deeply about these little things in life. It turns out there's a lot of different ideas that can weigh in. So my wife might say, look, we're going to pay for it anyways. And I think, well, hold on. What if there's an earthquake? You've opened that bag of chips. There's an earthquake. Everybody dies in the store. You never got to pay for it. And it turns out that it really was unethical because it wasn't yours to own because you never actually got to the register. My wife looks at me. She's like, you're crazy. And I'm like, no, I'm not. Just imagine that's just one incident that I'm giving you, like a snapshot of reality at what could happen, right? And how two people could see it differently. There are thousands more or hundreds more that you will go through in these readings, in these chapters, right? And think about this. Not what your professor believes and what I convey to you. What do you believe? Why do you believe it? That's even more importantly, right? Not what you believe. I just believe this, right? And it's like a willy-nilly thing. Somebody asks you why, and you're like, I don't know. I just believe it, man. Philosophy gets into something deeper. Well, why do you believe what you believe? Do you have reasons? Is it based upon a feeling? If you have reasons, what kind of reasons? Are they good? Are they bad? What kind of evidence? So this is just situating the context, right? I know I'm getting deep on you in the first paragraph, but that's the point of this class. We're going to get deep. We're going to dive in. So it is study philosophy, right? Let me go down, and then I'm going to break away from this part here. So there's some great thinkers that we will not cover in this class that have already been covered in the ancient to medieval philosophy class, which I teach. And these are the Pre-Socratics, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Augustine, Aquinas. There's just so many, I can't name them all, right? This class is going to stand on the backs of their ideas and how they've contributed to philosophy. And so starting from the Pre-Socratics, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, they're going to struggle with certain ideas about reality, right? And they're going to have certain views about it. Well, that's ancient to medieval philosophy, right? We're picking where they left. We're picking up where they left off. So do you have to know about them to start here? No. But if you did, it might help. But even if you didn't, that's all right. You can start right here, right now, just with this class, just with chapter 16, right? And if you're like me, if you get hooked on philosophy or addicted, you could always go back and take that class or look at some YouTube videos or buy a book, So anyways, So we want to think good in this class. And how to think good is we want to reason, and we want to reason about ideas, and then we're doing philosophy, right? So let's get some definitions on the board. What is philosophy? Well, in a really willy-nilly sense, it's thinking deeply about reality. In a technical sense, it comes from two Greek words, philo, sophia, the love of wisdom. Um, Philo is, a type, or it's a kind of love that the Greeks would use. Sophia is wisdom, so the love of wisdom. What is wisdom? Well, you might say, in a real easy to understand sense, it's connecting the dots. We have all done connecting the dot pictures where we trace, from 1 to 35 or 50 or whatever, and then we have a picture at the end of it. That's kind of what philosophy is doing with reality. It's trying to connect the dots, trying to form a picture. It's trying to crystallize some sort of belief system that you might have, where you go, okay, I understand. Um, and you can think of it like, let me make a distinction. Knowledge is, when you know something, it's true or false when you have knowledge, right? We can have all kinds of knowledge, whether we're going to Mount SAC, UCLA, Cypress College, Yale, Harvard, Stanford, whether we're looking at YouTube videos. We're seeking truth, right? Don't you think that as a human person, you're a natural truth seeker? You might seek out bullshit, right? Because it's fun, but in the end, you really want truth. You don't want to live in a world full of lies, do you? All right. So we're starting at we're setting a table, right? We're going into a restaurant called philosophy, and we're sitting at a table. We're trying to set this table. What are we after when we do philosophy? We're after the truth. And so philosophy means the love of wisdom, and we're after the truth. Well, what do I mean by connecting the dots? Here's what I mean. We can go to school and we can go on YouTube videos all day long and we can think we know the truth. That's fine. But now, can you connect the dots between different areas of reality? And that's what I'm going to get into now. So let me back out real quick. And again, you don't need to listen to this video, but I'm giving you the extra background for this class, so that when you navigate through these chapters and you get hung up on very technical things and you're lost inside the woods and you're looking at the bark of the trees going, man, I don't know what's going on. I'm helping you to realize, let's look at the whole forest all together. Let's look at a telescopic view of this thing. And here's how we start doing it, okay? Okay. The great ideas. Why in the world did I pick this book? And I've talked about this in my first lecture. For one reason, very powerfully, the great conversation. Philosophy is a great conversation. Whether you're studying ancient philosophy, medieval, Renaissance, where we're diving into now, all the way to modern and contemporary, where we're going to end up, it's a big conversation. People are contributing to these great ideas, and it's awesome, right? It's fun. My goal for you in this class, one of the goals is for you to contribute to the great conversation with your own ideas about reality. You're going to have ideas. You're going to try to weigh in. And so when we do this great conversation, we're talking about these great ideas, like what, first of all, let me backtrack. What's an idea? Let's see here. An idea, a formulated thought or opinion, whatever is known or supposed about something. So a formulated thought or opinion, we're thinking about something, right? That would be the idea. Well, Mortimer Adler, a long time ago, compiled something called the Great Ideas. There's 103 of them. Used to be less, but now there's more. And if you want to see my first video about these great ideas in the Thomas Aquinas Great Book School in Santa Paula, California, their whole 4-year curriculum is centered around these ideas. So now think about this. This is the forest that we're looking at. You're going to go through 15 chapters, chapter 16 all the way through 30 in this class, right? Each chapter is going to have different ideas coming at you. We're going to be looking at physics, maybe government, beauty, art, the word angel, duty, and you can look at a bunch of these, philosophy, science, sin, soul, slavery, state, time. There's all kinds of great ideas. Why are they called the great ideas? Well, it seems from the ancient times till now, a lot of the greatest ideas seem to center around these. What's definition? I mean, what the heck does definition even mean? How do we get a definition? What's the difference between a definition and an idea? What's dialectic? What's element? What's God? What do these all mean? Okay, so those are the little things. Those are the bark on the trees coming at you in each chapter. So now let me give you more of the forest view of philosophy. So let's go here. And yes, some of you are thinking, hey man, when's he going to start unpacking chapter 16 just a little bit? Well, I am now, but in a more broad way, and then I'll dive in a little bit. Okay, so let me do pens. Sorry, I got to pull out my pens. So philosophy. That's a real funky Y there. That's fine. We know that it's broken down philo, Sophia. We know that it's broken down love of wisdom. Love of wisdom. What's that? Well, of all the truth that we can get, we're gonna start connecting dots between one area of reality to another area, and that's where we're gonna get wisdom, something deeper. When we're doing this, oh wow, sorry about that. And this is going to be important that you see an overall bigger picture. Okay, when we do philosophy and love of wisdom, we're going to have different categories or main branches of philosophy. So one might be critical thinking. Some of you have taken a class like that. And if I misspell or things are sloppy, just forgive me. Logic, you might say, what's the difference? Critical thinking is more about your belief system and how you think and what sort of assumptions you're making. Logic is that end, the analysis of arguments. What is an argument? What's it made out of? Like what are premises and a conclusion and validity and invalidity and deductive, inductive. So you might say those two are kind of like one branch in philosophy, and it's really the main branch would be logic, and critical thinking would be part of that. Another one would metaphysics. Sorry about the spelling. And then metaphysics deals with reality. What is reality? What is out there? A lot of metaphysical questions. What is there? Or what is something? Or like what is X? That might be a metaphysical question, right? When we start doing metaphysics, we're talking about philosophy of religion. That might be a branch within metaphysics. You might have, and I won't write all these down, you might have philosophy of language. You might have free will, philosophy of mind, mental states versus brain states. And you ask questions like, what am I as a human person? Or what is language and why is this important? Those are all metaphysical questions. So philosophy of religion, philosophy of language, philosophy of mind. You have metaphysics of agency when we deal with free will. That's all under the headings of metaphysics. Epistemology. Episteme deals with knowing. Ology, of or related to, or the branch or the field associated with it. So when we do epistemology, we're really looking at the field of knowledge. Like what can we know? And so epistemological questions are different from metaphysical questions. Epistemological question dealing with knowledge would be like, how can I have an instance of knowledge? How could I know that I know something? How could I know that I'm believing something? What's the difference between belief and knowledge? And can I be skeptical about knowing? We're going to find out in chapter 16, Montaigne, he introduces skepticism. He doesn't introduce it really, but he's weighing into that idea based upon what has been talked about in the ancient through the medieval. And so he's going to be very skeptical, and he's going to say, look, I'm not so sure you can know certain things. So epistemology deals with knowledge. And so now let me give you a distinction between metaphysics and epistemology. Metaphysics, let me give you one question. God exists. That's a proposition about reality. It's either true or false, right? You either believe it or you don't, right? So you say God exists, or well, let's just take that one. The epistemological question is, how can you know that God exists? For example, God could exist. That's one thing, but another thing entirely is, how could you possibly know that God exists? It could be true that God exists or doesn't exist, and then it could be a whole different category of reality saying, could you actually know whether God exists or doesn't exist? See how mind-blowing that is already? I'm getting deep. We haven't even got into chapter 16. I'm showing you the forest. The branches of philosophy, they're different. Logic, how do we make arguments? Critical thinking, how when we look at arguments, how does our belief system as a whole weigh in? Like, when I take upon this new information about reality, how does that affect everything else I believe? Metaphysics, like, what is something? When I think about what am I, things like that. Epistemology, dealing with knowledge and skepticism. Here's another one. Ethics. I'll do this. I'll underline these main branches. Ethics deals with good, bad, wrong, or right. So that's another branch of philosophy. Ethics, you might have wrong and right actions, good and bad character, or good and bad people. How in the world do you figure out what is good versus what is bad? Where do you start? Like, what about bad versus evil? Is there sort of like a hierarchy? Like, when something's really, really, really super mega ultra bad, it's evil, or it's a kind of bad. What is that all about? You can take an ethics class, right? So ethics deals with that, and it's, again, all of this is for the love of wisdom. They want to try to think deeply about reality and all these great ideas that you've looked at, and how they might be different when you think about different branches. Like, are we doing critical thinking, logic, metaphysics, epistemology, ethics? And then the last branch, aesthetics. So this deals with beauty. And we can go on about beauty, and some of you be like, I'm not into beauty. Yeah, of course you are. You might not like that word beauty, but you're definitely into beauty, and I'll tell you why. When you look at a movie, or you go on a vacation, or you discover new cool things on YouTube, like certain arguments or news or whatever, or you listen to music, or you go to raves, all of that is seeking beauty. And then you might ask, well, what is beauty? How do works of art tie into that? So what I've done is I've just set the stage now. I've given you, and there are more, but I've just given you these main branches of reality, main branches of philosophy. 1, critical thinking, logic. 2, metaphysics. 3, epistemology. 4, ethics. 5, aesthetics. We'll throw up another one in there because Mercant talks about this. Human nature. And by the way, my videos might be long. You could easily push pause, come back later. That's the beauty of my videos. Push pause, come back. You don't have to listen to the whole thing. You can listen to bits and pieces, or you can listen to the whole thing. But human nature, what does it mean to be human? Is there sort of some essential qualities about being human? How can I be human, like, better versus less human? This will get into a branch called existentialism. What does it mean to be human? What should I be doing as a human? What's the ultimate thing that humanity should be doing? Start thinking about questions like that. So you have 6 main branches, let's say, that I've just thrown up. Each of these chapters, you're going to have authors or philosophers. They're going to contribute to one or more branches. There might be some that hit all 6 of these. There might be some that just stay right in epistemology, some that just stay with logic, some that just stay with ethics. That's the whole point of seeing the forest. These 6 branches, you might say, and all these 100 and something ideas, you're going to have different philosophers weigh in differently. You're going to be one of those philosophers in training weighing in. You might think, whoa, dude, I've never even heard of the word epistemology, but I definitely know about knowledge. Yeah, I understand. Like, I think I know all kinds of things. And I want to get more true belief. And what's the difference between true belief and knowledge and skepticism? And some of you might be blown away by ethics. Some of you might be blown away by all of it, okay? And some of you might be turned off by all of this. But I don't think so, actually. I don't think any of you will be turned on by this, because I think it's within your makeup as a human being to seek truth. And I'm going to help you seek out truth better than you already do. And I'm going to help you see this by weighing in on different philosophers from the Renaissance to the contemporary period. Okay, so I got the table set. We're in the restaurant of philosophy. The table's set with there's 6 there for at least now with what I'm sharing with. There's 6 main branches. Some of you might think there's more. That's fine. And now we're going to start with the actual Renaissance period. So, oh yeah, and let me just show you something. What I've done is on that Word document, I've kind of hashed out this little guy over here, Word to the students. I've kind of hashed out what the author was trying to do down here when he says study philosophy, and then he starts getting into the issues, metaphysics, right? Human nature, ethics, epistemology. Notice he doesn't have aesthetics up there. Notice he doesn't have logic and critical thinking, but he talks about all that inside there. So what I've done is taken what he's going to and then this is a really important section. So yeah, this is part of your reading, and I'll assume that you've already done this reading, which is really important, because one of the end goals is we want true belief when we do these readings. You want to think better about reality. How do we get there? Sometimes we get there by form of arguments. There might be that a true belief is forced upon you because a particular philosopher gives you reasons to believe or evidence in the form of an argument where you're looking at a conclusion. You're like, oh, that makes sense, dude. I love that evidence that you presented to me, dude. I mean, I'm going to take on that conclusion into my belief system, and now I'm going to think about reality differently. And here's another great thing. What's one of the bottom lines that I think that this entire class could do for you? This. When we're doing philosophy, we're thinking more about ourselves and reality. And when you do that, I think that you can contribute better as a citizen back to society. The more you know about society and yourself, the more you can contribute back as a citizen. The more fruitful you'll be, the more flourishing you'll have, the more well-being you'll have. You get there by knowing more. And when you know more, you can contribute back more. So that's one of the bottom lines, which I think is awesome. So anyways, that's just unpacking briefly this little intro section. And now we'll go to chapter 16, the Renaissance period. And again, I am not going to comb through everything in these books. One of the most important things about this chapter is it's a transitionary chapter. It's basically taking what the ancients to the medievals or the Middle Ages, these great issues, arguments, and ideas that they've weighed into. And this chapter is setting the stage for what you're going to see for the rest of the chapter that the modern philosopher is going to be weighing in on. So it's a transitionary period. It's actually a pretty easy chapter. It's got a lot of authors in there. They're doing a lot of things, but I'll give you central things that they're weighing in on. One of them is God. God's front and center in this chapter. But let me read to you just a little bit. The Renaissance was a period in European history marking the transition from the medieval or the Middle Ages to modern periods. So it really is covering the 15th and the 16th centuries. Let me put a timestamp on it. It occurred after the crisis in the late Middle Ages and was associated with great social change. . 'Cause The intellectual basis of the Renaissance was its version of humanism, derived from the concept of Roman Humanists and the rediscovery of classical Greek philosophy, such as that of Pythagoras, who said that man is the measure of all things. The new thinking became manifest in art, architecture, politics, science, and literature. So, to set the stage, man is the measure of all things. Instead of relying on God more, like the ancients through the medieval period, now we're going to start breaking away from that. Not saying that people have to or should do it, but that's what the Renaissance explosion's all about. But again, this is a transitionary chapter. So let me give you sort of the highlights in this chapter. And again, I do not go over the details of this chapter on purpose. I might weigh in here and there, but let me give you the old way of thinking from the ancient to the medieval period. And then let me give you the new way of thinking, meaning this semester, this book, meaning this class, from the Renaissance to the modern. Here's an old way of thinking. The universe is thought to be finite. What's that mean? It means the universe goes out of existence. The new way of thinking, the universe is thought to be infinite. It doesn't go out of existence. It always is there. So that's kind of the transition from, again, an older way of thinking into newer. Another old way of thinking, the earth is at the center of the universe. The earth is at the center of the universe. The new way of there is no center of the universe. The earth is certainly not the center of the universe. The universe is way bigger than people thought back in the ancient days. The old way of thinking, celestial matter is quite different from terrestrial. And you might think of these as heavenly ways of existing. The new way of thinking, matter and motion are uniform throughout the universe. So you might say the old way of thinking is the earth and heaven and the cosmos, they're kind of different. There's different modes of existence depending on where you're at in the cosmos, whether you're on earth, whether you're in heaven, whatever. The new way, no, matter and motion, they're all the same, uniform, all throughout reality. The old way of thinking, everything has its place. Everything is perfectly placed for a reason. The new way of thinking, neutral space supplants meaningful places. So you might say, there is no everything has its place. There's no ultimate meaning for why things that are the way they are. Maybe there's no meaning at all. Whereas the old way, there's definitely meaning for everything. So in chapter 16, you're going to see people weigh in on this differently. Old way, everything has its purpose, its final cause. This goes back to the ultimate meaning, like everything has its perfect place, right? There's a definite reason it exists. New way of thinking, final causes are banished in favor of mathematical formulas. So you might be thinking, in one sense, there could be like, in one way of viewing the cosmos as chaos. There's no meaning at all. And you're going to have battle over these ideas. Some people are going to say, no, there's definitely meaning. And you're going to see that inside these chapters coming. So anyways, one last way of thinking, an old way. The universe is a stage setting for its central drama. What's the central drama? Humanity. Us. Human sin and salvation. There's like a battleground, the tension between sin and salvation. A new way, it becomes less easy to believe that it exists for us, meaning this isn't for humans. All this cosmos and all this, and even the earth itself, it's not really meant for humans. So there's a tension point. One last old way of thinking, things have the qualities they seem to have. Fire is yellow and hot. New ways, secondary qualities become subjective effects of purely quantitative entities. Well, that's a lot. I'll get into that a little bit as I get through the chapter a little bit. So again, you can listen to this over and over. You're going to get old ways of thinking versus new ways of thinking. They're tension points. And the reason that these are brought up is that's why chapter 16 is pivotal. So now let's go into a little bit more in the chapter. So Hildegard of Bingen, there's a date stamp, 1098 through 1179. She's huge in the church. She's talking about heavens, and she's been given these visions of, God and how reality is supposed to be. So you might say the way Hildegard of Bingen weighs in to philosophy or thinking deeply is it has everything to do with God, her place in reality. And by the way, she has a huge following with music. She's done a lot with music, written music, hymns, and all that. You can go on YouTube, for example, and find out that just one channel alone, she's got, 1.9 million views on her music. And she's got a huge following. So the way that you're going to ride with Hildegard is you're going to be thinking about God a lot. And it's going to have a lot to do with her visions. You can look at a video that I've linked up there. So, yeah, and a lot with music. And so music has a central focus with her because it's how we tune ourselves into God. And you might not believe in God, that's fine. But if you do, you might say, oh, that makes sense. A lot of people do worship God in the form of music before you listen to messages about God. And it has something to do with calming our soul down the right way so that we can be in tune to receive God's message, something like that. So that's going to be a huge focus for her. And if you agree with that, great. And if you don't, also great. But again, this is somebody weighing in on reality and her place in reality. It's going to have everything to do with God with her. What else? And you remember that one of the main branches of philosophy, aesthetics, like art and beauty and all that, music's right in that category. I mean, I listen to music all the time. I listen to music while I'm preparing these lectures for y'all. I mean, can you imagine? Like, it calms me down. Sometimes I listen to thunder and rainstorms. Sometimes I'm listening to waves. Sometimes I'm listening to like just real soft, other like more intense music, whatever I'm in the mood for, but it helps me relax. Whether somebody wants to worship God or not, or just relax or meditate or do whatever, music really helps. And here's a really good question for you. Why don't the animals listen to music? Why is it just humans? I'm going to leave that for you, food for thought. What makes us different from animals? We are animals, but we're rational animals, and we stand separate from, like, let's say dolphins or monkeys or frogs. Like if I'm listening to like 21 Pilots, just throw a band out there, right? Or if I'm listening to Hildegard, can a frog or a donkey or a monkey or a dolphin, can they like groove out to the music as well as I do? No. Why? It's very fascinating. Were we created a certain way to where we listen to music? And here's a deeper question. Should we be listening to music? Is it there for a reason? Like, might it make us relax and engage better with reality and be more human? All kinds of questions come up. So in this chapter, Virgil, the ancient poet, really cool what he does with Dante and the Inferno and what's that all about, different levels of hell. I'll let you look at some of those videos that I've linked. Here's something to think about. Descending into the depths of hell. This is really interesting. If you were to create some sort of hierarchy, let's like what's bad and what's like less bad. Well, he starts, he's saying, the less, well, that's kind of bad. And then when you get down to traitors, that's like super bad. And it goes from less to more bad as he descends down. I think that's fascinating. Some of us think that way. For example, don't you think Hitler, people like him that murdered millions of people with these harsh and calculating ways of committing genocide, don't you think they deserve more punishment than, let's say, somebody speeding, getting a ticket when the cop pulls them over on the side of the road? Don't you think there's some sort of hierarchy in our modern world? Where Virgil thought, yep, there's a hierarchy in our modern world, like crimes that deserve the death penalty, or like, let's say, a ticket, or like, hey, like, please don't do that again, like different kind of punishment. Well, he's going to say, yeah, that exists in a different reality called the afterlife, hell and heaven, right? And again, it has everything to do with God orchestrating this kind of reality after you die. And this might weigh into religion and philosophy of religion. And so now you're going to get all kinds of things weighing in. Do Christians, do Muslims, do Jews, do Hindus, do Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, do all these different types of religious avenues? Do they have different hierarchies of heaven and hell? Do they all believe in a heaven or hell, or do they dismiss it? So Virgil just weighs in with his aspect and says, look, yep, there's different levels. And then he says there's different kinds of sins going on. And I will, at this point, weigh in and say, one of my main focuses is on the virtues versus the vices. I'm what you call a virtue ethicist. I'm doing my dissertation in virtue ethics. And so for me, it's all about character. So for some of you, you might say, like, why take this class? I'm going to say, because I think it'll be better for your character. I think the more you know about yourself and reality, the more you'll contribute to reality and be a better citizen. That's going to have everything to do with your character. Well, what is that? Something that individuates you from me versus your aunt versus, your best friend. Your character is a collection of mental states, good versus bad. You're going to have virtues, excellences of character, things that are good, and you're going to have vices, things that are bad, things that are not excellent at all, things that are vicious, right? So Virgil tries to weigh in on this, and he's going to say, look, we all struggle with this: lust, pride, envy, greed, sloth. Some of us more than others. And you might say a stable kind of character is where you struggle with this, but you come out in the end thinking, no, my character is good in the fact that I might be tempted with certain things, different vices, but in the end, I will be virtuous because I will be able to conquer my vices and have a better character. And I'm not going to go into too far in depth, but that's how I think as a virtue ethicist. And then that would be connecting the dots in one way, like, hey, wow, not only are we thinking about God, we're thinking about us, we're thinking about what is the point of all this? Well, to live a good life. To live a good life, you want to avoid doing certain bad things versus certain good things. So Virgil's going to weigh in on that and say, well, depending on how you struggle with these virtues and vices and how your character is, will depend on what kind of level of hell you go to. And if you don't go to hell, what kind of level of heaven you're existing in. And again, for some of you, you might reject all this thing, and this is all horseshit, heaven and hell. But then I would ask you, is this horseshit? No. There are things that you really do struggle with. Now, I've given you some bad ones, right? Some vices. Let me give you some virtues. Let me see. Does he list virtues? Probably not. Let me give you some one. A virtue might be courage, humility, compassion, gracefulness, truthfulness. Those are all virtues, right? We want to strive for those. We want more of those. And the more we get, the more virtues we attain, the better our character is. And in the end, you don't want bad character. You want good character. And the only way to get there is to pursue virtue. So that's going to be one of the highlights that Virgil gives us, right? And some of these other authors will give us through later chapters. But for right now, just think about that. What kind of vices do you have in your life? What kind of virtues do you have in your life? What do you struggle with? And what are you really good at? Some of us are more compassionate than other people, right? Does that mean other people have no compassion? No, they probably do. Unless you're a psychopath or sociopath, you might not have compassion at all. So that might be the end goal, character. How do you get there? You have to get virtues, which are excellences, things that are good, okay? Think about the people that you look up to in life. You want to be more like them. We could throw out a whole slew of names. Mother Teresa, Martin Luther King, Jesus. These are just starters. We can think of a whole list of good people that you want to aspire to be more like. Why do you want to be more like them? Well, you might say they have certain virtues that I think are very admirable. Like they pull me in. Like I'm thinking, dude, I want to be more like that person. And they don't have as many of these vices. Can you have an imaginary person that you aspire to be more like? Yeah. Some of you in your responses, in your getting to know you talked about Marvel comics, right? Why? Like the Avengers, right? There might be characters like Iron Man or like Superman, or you can think of all these different characters. Why do we aspire to be more like them? Well, because they have more virtue. What about an imaginary one? For me, I love watching movies. I love watching The Rock. The Rock is awesome. I don't care what movie that guy's in. He's always like, I don't know. Whenever I see him, I'm like, that guy's badass, right? Why do I say that? Because there's something about virtues that he has. There's something about his character. I want to be more like him. If he's good in a particular movie. Most of them, he is. So it'd be an example of somebody imaginary. So that's just going a little deeper on Virgil and why it might be important in your life. Reforming the church. What do we get? Martin Luther. So one thing to know about him, Martin Luther, he splits the Catholic Church. He was a Catholic monk. He was of the Augustinian order. There's different orders within the Catholic Church. You might say the Augustinian order was very prized as far as its intellect. It's very smart people came out of the Augustinian order, and he believed that God plays a very front and center role in reality, and he thought that the Catholic Church was twisting, you might say, Scripture and saying, look, they might say, look, you can buy these things called indulgences, and if you buy them, then you'll definitely go to heaven, but you got to give us your money. And Martin Luther's like, what? I mean, seriously, what? Oh, and just as a side note, when you hear that word Martin Luther King, he was named, that name is famous because of Martin Luther. This is the original Martin Luther. And then Martin Luther King, you might say, that name comes from this guy. And so why was this guy significant? Well, he was saying there's some sort of corruption. I'm going to deal with it. So Martin Luther King did the same thing, right? The civil rights movement. So let's go back to Martin Luther. So he grounds his ultimate argument in the Bible. He says, look, the Bible's the word of God. We all can agree on this. I'm going to say that you've got problems, Catholic Church, and I'm amongst you. I am a Catholic monk. I am teaching people just like you are. But here's the problem. I'm going to say you have a little bit of corruption going on in your church, and you got to change it. And this is the point of his 95 thesis. They say, hey, I got 95 problems for you. Here they are. I'm going to tack them onto this church and what is it, the Castle Church. And he says, look, I got 95 problems. Deal with all 95 or I'm out of here. I'm no longer going to serve the Catholic Church. I'm done. And what the Catholic Church say? All right, we need to kill him. And then you get, he basically flees. He tries to escape. Getting killed, and then you have a bunch of kings in Germany saying, all right, we're going to protect this guy. And by the way, they could have killed him too because they were a part of the Catholic Church. So they said, no, Martin Luther, he's on to something. And let me take you back. This is really important. If some of you don't really know what's going on inside this debate between the Catholics and the Protestants and what Martin Luther did, whether you're a Catholic or Protestant, that doesn't really matter right now. I'm just going to give you a kind of dividing line. So you might say they have two things in common, and they bifurcate or they go their own ways on one particular thing. One of them is, let me see here, get these straight. Tradition. Both the Catholics and the Protestants believe in tradition, how things were. They believe it's pretty important. Both believe in the Bible. They think it's the Word of God. Here's where they go. Here's where they differ. The Protestants will say the ultimate judge will be reason that will decide if we have a biblical issue. Who ultimately decides? The Protestants say, look, we got to look at tradition. We actually got to look at the Bible, and we got to reason through this and say, look, this is how it works. And that's where Luther was. Catholic Church would say the magisterium. I'm not going to spell this out. Just think the magisterium. What's that mean? The ultimate authority, the deciding issue would be the magisterium, the Pope, the bishops. That's the hierarchy within the Catholic Church. They decide. So if you have a biblical issue and you can't decide whether it's right or wrong, and you're using the Bible and tradition, the ultimate deciding, the decision maker is the Pope. There you go. And There's something called an ex-cathedral pronunciation. It's when the Pope says something with full authority, and it's as if God himself is speaking. So that would be like the magisterium of the Catholic Church saying, look, this is the way it is. This is what must be done. So what Martin Luther is going to say is, look, man, there's 95 problems going on. And he goes, yeah, we agree with a lot of tradition and Bible, but here's the thing. Let's say for the sake of like indulgences, Luther would say, you're saved by grace through faith in God alone. And the Catholic Church would say, you could be saved if you donate money to the church. They're called indulgences, and you can kind of buy your way into heaven, or like buy your way out of purgatory or something like that. So then Luther would come down and say, look, man, this is where I'm going to end up, and I'm going to use reason to decide this. And how am I going to do that? I'm actually going to look at Scripture, and I'm going to see if something contradicts what the Catholic Church says. And if it does, I'm departing. And then the Catholic Church would say, no, you're misled. We're going to go and say this is the way it is. So that, in a nutshell, is why Luther is important in this chapter, is because there's a central role that God plays in both the Catholic Church and the Protestant Church. And back then, all you had was a Catholic Church, basically, and you had a division now, like in the power structure. And so there's a lot of similarities. There's going to be differences. And so why is this significant? Well, because in using reason as an authority source and breaking away from the power of the magisterium, you might say that's a philosophical contribution that Martin Luther has. He's going to say, look, man, so this is not to debate who's wrong or right, Catholic Church, Protestant. This is to give you a better view of what happened during that time and how much they agreed and why they disagreed. So going back, and you can look at this more, what were those 95 problems? Well, one of the biggest ones was, salvation, going back to what Virgil tapped into, whether you're saved or not saved, hell or heaven. Martin Luther is going to say you get there by faith alone in God, and God gives you the gift of salvation. And the Catholic Church doesn't give it to you, God does. Okay, so that's the division there between the two, and that's why Luther was important. Humanism, you might say one of the highlights for this is when you start looking towards mankind more than you do God. You might say there's a shift in this Renaissance period. And we'll see this later on when we get into debates between atheism, theism, and agnosticism, things like that. Well, this is one of those shifts. Like, hey, if some people are going to say, we're kind of out of this God thing, and other people are going to say, no. The way we do philosophy is we always have God front and center, and then you're going to have divisions on how does that work, which I've just shown you with Martin Luther. So, yes, let me make sure. Yeah, I would just say you can read this part here to go deeper into this, but I'm going to pull out of this now. So, individualism, people relying less on the church, less on God, and more into themselves, or and this is going to be one of these ideas that emerge. Montaigne, he brings in skepticism. You can look at this. He brings in a lot, but I'm just saying one of these things that falls out of what he does. He defends somebody's position about God. Raymond Sabone, you can look at that, and there's even a video I linked to you. And when he defends it, he gives an apology. When you do an apology, you're not saying, oh my God, I'm so sorry, man. I'm so sorry I offended you. No. Apology is coming from the Greek. It means to give a rational defense for why you do what you do. So he's going to give an apology or a rational defense for somebody else's position. And it has everything to do with proofs for Christianity, whether they're true or not. But there's something else. He brings in skepticism, and this relates to this, right here. Skeptical philosophy. Cover this a lot in the ancient to the medieval. How you can know certain things, whether you can know them or not. So that's his contribution into the branch of philosophy called epistemology. Okay, so there he goes. So he the author brings in Sextus Empiricus. You might say he's one of the fathers of skepticism. So if you like what skepticism does, and I think that all of us should be skeptical in certain ways about a lot of things, and then not so skeptical about other things. And let me give you an example. If you're skeptical about every possible thing that you can know about reality, meaning you're so skeptical you say nobody could know anything about anything at any time, that's universal skepticism. I don't think anybody should hold that position because I think it's crazy. You might be skeptical about certain parts of reality and not so skeptical about other parts of reality. That might be a more healthy way of thinking about it. But if you're overly skeptical about everything and you try to use as an argument against somebody or to somebody, all they have to do is say, hold on, you're claiming to say that I should be skeptical about everything. All they have to say is, well, how do you know that's true? Again, you're a skepticist. Why should I believe you? So there's sort of inherent problems with being overly skeptical, but just keep that in mind. I think certain areas maybe we could be skeptical on. For example, the existence of aliens, right? I think it's possible aliens could exist. And some of you are thinking, oh my God, he just took us to the aliens route. Well, why not, right? I've seen evidence all over YouTube and throughout history, and some of it I think is just crazy dumb, right? Some of it I'm thinking, whoa. When Air Force pilots are tracking things through the sky, I'm like, I don't know, maybe. But like, I might still be skeptical. I might be like, look, until I see a freaking UFO aircraft come down and land in my front yard and aliens and shit come right out of that thing, then I might be like, okay, I think I might believe. But then again, I might be skeptical thinking, wait, hold on. Did somebody make that up? Are they like wearing suits? You see, so you can drive skepticism all the way through even UFOs. But some of us might say, no, I saw something so nuts, I believe UFOs exist, and I think aliens exist, right? It's going to be on what kind of skepticism you use. All I'm saying is Montaigne gives us his contribution to that here, which is worth noting. And then Copernicus to Kepler to Galileo. I won't go through all this, but let's just say they give scientific theories on our place in the universe. And let's just say that Earth is not the center of the universe like Aristotle and some of the ancients thought. Let's just say it ain't Earth. Even if you thought God created mankind in God's image, you might say it's still not, Earth is still not the center of the universe. Some of you might say, no, it is. The point is that Kepler, Copernicus, and Galileo, they're going to weigh in and say, look, the universe is way bigger than you think. Way bigger. We're in one galaxy with 9 planets. There's all kinds of more galaxies out there. And we all revolve around the sun. That's just a fact. And you might say that these people figured it out. And they're going to have differences in how they do it. One's going to say, look, we rotate around, the sun in a totally, circular matter. And then somebody's going to say, no, it's more like a sphere, not necessarily circular, meaning more like, more like this, instead of revolving around, like, oh my gosh, instead of one body revolving around another like this, it's more like this, more like elliptical. So you're going to get differences here. And that's the philosophical contribution. They're trying to say, look, this is how reality is when we look out in the cosmos, and they're going to have differing theories. And it's really cool, though, how they come up with these things. I mean, Copernicus and Kepler and Galileo, they'll know more than most of us will ever forget. That's how smart they were. And keep in mind, they didn't have massive telescopes like we do today. They didn't have electron microscopes. They didn't have these massive things, but they still observe the sky and they figure out things. It's awesome contributions. So you might say these are some of the contributors throughout this chapter. And I've linked up some good videos. And the reason I do that is I think some of these people make these videos way better than I could. They've got a lot of graphics. And that's the whole point of it, is that I'm not going to go through every single detail in the chapter. I'm just going to give you some main, important things. And it seems like mankind, God, the cosmos are front and center in this chapter. And they're going to have some issues with all three of these. And it's going to set the stage for, let's say, chapter 17 coming with Descartes, how he deals with knowledge and God and all this, and how can you know certain things? How can you know that we exist? He's going to take on some of those issues that are raised here. Last one, primary and secondary qualities. Galileo brings these up. These are really fascinating. Locke, as we're going to see in later chapters, he actually borrows these primary and secondary qualities, and Berkeley. So Locke and Berkeley are going to engage with these. These are really fascinating things. I'll give you an example. Primary qualities are things that exist inside of an object. For example, like an apple. You might pick up an apple and say an apple has certain size. It's made up of certain atoms. It has certain mass, and you might say that just is the way this particular apple is. That's a primary quality of the apple. Whether I'm looking at it or not, it's just what the apple has in it. Secondary quality might be me coming along saying, oh, that apple's red. That tastes a certain way. It feels like this. Those are secondary qualities that can be debated on. For example, I could show you an apple that's red to a class of 50 people, and each one of you might say, well, that's kind of like a different color red. And it might be that a lot of us disagree on what exact shade of red it is, or how it tastes. Is it more sweet? How it feels. Is it more hard? Is it more soft? Those are all secondary qualities that can be debated on. But the primary qualities are things inherent inside the object itself that can't be debated on. Why does this matter? That is a mind-blowing distinction, ladies and gentlemen, on how we do philosophy, how we analyze like what things are, like human persons, animals, stars, beds, apples, chairs. Like, what is the thing we're looking at? And why do we have so much disagreement over it? He's going to say one of the reasons we might have such disagreement is secondary qualities. We're disagreeing over those. So that distinction is very helpful. And we'll see how Locke and Berkeley pick this up, Barclay, when they pick this up later on. But I think that's a really good distinction. So make sure you know about that. And we're pretty much done with me going over some of the things that I think are important in the chapter. One of the things, and I said this in my intro video, is before you read a chapter, you can actually look at some of these terms and say, look, this is what the author of the Mercant, he wants us to look at. And so I've just covered some of them: Hildegard, Virgil, Martin Luther, Grace, Indulgence, 95 Thesis, And that way, when you're reading the chapter, you could say, some of these things, primary to secondary qualities, some of the things are important. Some of these people are important. I should know who they are. So that's pretty much it. And as a quick review, let me go over a couple quick deals, and then I'll just end this little mini lecture. But in the Aristotle, Ptolemy, Dante picture of the world, heaven is really quite literally above us. It's a literal place above us. So you might say that's the contribution that they give us in this chapter. Whereas one way of thinking about heaven is an extra dimensional way of existing. Let's say when we get into these other chapters, into modern philosophy, you might say in our time-space reality, we have a four-dimensional reality. What are the four dimensions? Pause this video real quick, think about it, and then push play and tell me if you think you got them right. What are the four dimensions of reality we live in? Okay, now I'm going to give you the answer. Length, width, height, and time. Length, width, and height gives us the physical cosmos. Everything can be expressed in these dimensions, these three dimensions physically, and then you get time. Okay, so we exist in time. These are the four dimensions. But what if heaven was like a fifth dimension, like some extra dimensional way of existing outside of our time-space reality? Oh, that's a little deep, right? Well, that is thinking more philosophically about it. So in that sense, is heaven a literal physical place, or is it an extra dimensional place that's not physically related? And that's kind of one of these issues to think about. In Dante's Divine Comedy, spiritual sins such as pride and envy, they're judged worse than bodily sins such as lust and gluttony. There's a hierarchy of sins, right? You might want to pay attention to that. The Renaissance humanists, they celebrate the human being as a central facet in all the created world. So humans are front and center. It's like a big deal for them, right? Whereas in earlier periods, you might think God was front and center. God's the big deal. In the Renaissance period, no. Humans are. What are indulgences? Well, they're sold to ensure salvation or reduce spent time in purgatory. Once again, Martin Luther challenged that. He's saying, look, dude, you get to heaven by grace through faith in God and God alone. You don't get there by paying something. Hey, like, let's say you're a billionaire back in that day, or a millionaire, or you got a lot of money, you got like a castle. Those kind of people could afford to pay a lot of money to the Catholic Church and be like, I'm saved. But what about the poor people? Could they do that? No. So it sets up some immediate anxiety. Like, if you're poor, what are you going to give? Are you going to give your service to the Catholic Church? Maybe then you become saved. So that's kind of the tension point that Martin Luther dealt with, called the Indulgences, and how the Catholic Church responded. Montaigne, just in a nutshell, he said that he thought man was crazy and literally made up gods by the dozen. So you might say he was really skeptical about what we could know about God. And he was very skeptical on the capacity of the human or mankind getting there. And like I said, the universe, the Earth is not the center of the universe. Turns out that we're just one of many, 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 many planets in this cosmos. And then you're going to see a debate between Galileo, Copernicus, and Kepler, and what their view is and how bodies in motion move. Very fascinating science going on there. And what are they after? They're after the truth as well as the philosophers, and they're going to use science to get there. They're going to observe the world, and they're going to try to come up with these certain theories. And Kepler thought that mathematics was the key to understanding the universe. So he's going to differ from Copernicus and Galileo, and his main contribution is mathematics. He's going to say there's some sort of order going on here, and that's the key to understanding. He's going to use mathematics. And then know the difference between primary and secondary qualities. Primary are inherent inside of the object. Secondary, or basically us looking at some object and mapping on our sort of subjective tastes. So, for example, warmth, pain, and green are examples of secondary qualities. Those are not inside of the object. Those are kind of what we infer about it. Take, for example, green. Let's say I'm looking at a green bean. What kind of shade green is there? You might have all kinds of different, answers. There might be 10 different shades of green, right? And what's the point of Galileo bringing this up? Well, it might be healthy to say that maybe we can disagree on secondary qualities, but we certainly can't disagree on primary qualities inherent inside the substance itself. And why is that important? Because that way of thinking might help us with metaphysical, epistemological questions coming up in these different chapters. Because remember, these main branches of philosophy, they're after the truth of reality, and they're going to get there in different ways. So I know today was a lot. I know this is a big mini lecture, but it's kind of sets the stage for chapters to come. So I hope this helped you. Again, you can listen to this video over and over or stop at different sections. But in that sense, all right. Hope you have learned more. Again, you can check out some of the videos. I've looked at all of them. I love them. And I will see you next time.